Okay, hello together. The first thing I would like ISG and the organizers for the invitation and the opportunity to talk in front of you. I will talk today about the need and the reasoning why we need a decentralized real-time risk infrastructure. Few words about me. I'm the co-founder of Solity network. This is the startup I will introduce today. A few words about my background. I spent more than 10 years in corporate development, working for major German corporations. From my background, I have a technical and business background, and I'm in crypto since 2016, basically following the first days of Ethereum and up until now. Has also exposure with my first startup, which I started beginning 2020. So, I believe the recent events in crypto reminded us again like how dangerous the space actually is. With the collapse of Terra Luna, there was a massive wave of liquidation triggered in itself, and it leads to consequences which we are still feeling in itself. Even the founder of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, warned us that some of the exchanges are still illiquid and there could be some additional problem coming in itself. This wave of liquidation led to a situation that some financial organizations like Trio Capital, Celsius, and BlockFi went insolvent. And the interesting part actually is when we look at these financial startups, most of them were actually centralized in itself. For example, BlockFi was valued last year around 5 billions, and it was sold a few months ago for 20 million to FTX. On the other side, we have the DeFi space, which was also affected by the wave of liquidations, but from the liquidity side in itself. Most of the protocols are still there, they are still working, they are doing what they are actually supposed to do. And I guess this event showed us the huge difference between centralized and decentralized entities in itself. On the one side, we have intransparent financial systems, so basically we kind of don't know what are they doing, how they generate these yields behind their products. There is lack of trust between the institutions in itself. We have the counterparty risk. We all can remind the Lehman moment we experience now in crypto. And lastly, the risk management they have, if they have one, is mostly internal, and basically we don't know what they are doing in itself. On the other side, when we look DeFi in itself, it's transparent, it's immutable, code is law, so basically everyone who has a good technical understanding can look behind the protocol, what are they doing what they should do in itself, and it leads to a different level of trust in itself. But also DeFi introduced new kind of risks in itself. And currently in the space, these fundamental risks are outsourced to the end user in itself. Looking at the DeFi space currently, I mean, we have to be honest, like we made a major progress in the last 2 years. We have amazing decentralized exchanges, lending, borrowing protocols. A lot of these yield aggregators came up, but to empower the next wave of innovation in this space, data is needed. And when I say like data, it starts with the thing that we need really a lot of data to build meaningful business models in itself. The data we currently have in the space is not trusted. What does it mean? So basically, if we find the data and even check the data, how it's behind generated in itself, we will get very, very cautious. What are we looking at the moment? Then the thing is like, of course, like making sense of this data is very hard, especially when the team where everything is on chain, there are like happening a lot of transactions, and I don't think like many people are able to do that. And lastly, building some kind of logic in a decentralized space is a just different beast of a problem than doing it a centralized way in itself. And if we don't want to end up in a wild, wild west, we have to improve on that topic in itself. Additionally, now with the bridges which comes to the space, like basically connecting, for example, the Ethereum chain with the Avalanche chain or with the Polkadot chain, additional level of risk is added to the whole space. That means basically the risk we have currently in the space is multiplied by the risk of the bridges in itself. And if we don't want to have again a situation we had a few months, we have to think differently about risk in general. And now I'm coming to a topic of risk in itself. When we look at the current space in itself, there are some attempts to build some kind of risk assessments. Usually these risk assessments are done by the startup, by the team in itself. They have some kind of expertise, they are using it for that. These risk assessments are mostly centralized. And once this risk assessment is done, basically it should serve the whole space. Even we have like DEXs, lending borrowing protocols, and yield aggregators in itself, there should be like one fit solution which doesn't make any sense because the risk level and risk sensitivity in the whole space is different in itself. Then also when we look at the data they generate, usually these are centralized entities. That means a decentralized protocol can hardly integrate these data streams from their side. Why? Because if we have on one side a decentralized protocol, on the other side a centralized entity who generates this data, basically this centralized entity, even it tries to help around risk, is basically can be attacked and cause massive harm to the decentralized protocol itself. So basically that means, for example, one of these risk assessments just needs one data point to change, and this can have huge consequences on automated, for example, yield aggregators in itself. What do we actually need? So the first thing is like we have to go away from this risk assessment from the experts, even they are great. We have to have a more objective, data-driven way how to analyze the risk in itself. The second thing is like even these protocols are written once in with smart contracts. They are static. They are like working and operating in a dynamic environment in itself. That means the risk in itself is dynamic, and we need a real-time update around that topic in itself. Then the second part is, as I mentioned, is the risk frameworks in itself. We basically cannot have one risk framework for everything. There are many risk frameworks for different solutions in itself. Like we will have risk frameworks for lending protocols, risk frameworks for yield aggregators in itself, and the user should decide how this risk framework should look like according to their risk sensitivity in itself. And lastly, if we want to integrate these risk frameworks in the strategies of these protocols, how they operate, the whole infrastructure has to be decentralized. That means like from the point of getting the data, storing the data, computing the data, and putting the data on chain, the whole chain has to be decentralized, that a decentralized authority can trust this data stream in itself. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Solity Networks. So basically we are aiming to solve this problem. We are building customizable risk frameworks by using big data. So basically we are building objectively and quantified run risk frameworks. We are focusing from the first day on multi-chain. That means we are not only focusing on EVM, on Ethereum and EVM like chains, but also other ones. And we have a real-time feature which is important. So basically once you integrate your risk frameworks, there are constant updates, and your strategy, whatever the risk framework is used, can with that adjust their strategy, and possibly the harm can be reduced in itself. And lastly, the whole infrastructure should be like decentralized. These risk frameworks should be able to be implemented in protocols in itself, and the protocols should trust how the data is gathered, stored, and what's with the data done in itself. So, and lastly, what do we believe, like how DeFi is going to evolve over the next years? In the last 2 years, we had this speculative mania around maximizing the profit without looking at the risk. We believe this is going to change. We will go more in a direction of risk-reward by using data. The second thing is, like, once the data layer and risk data is there, accessible, new kind of financial product can be built in the DeFi space in itself, which is at the moment needed. And lastly, we have so many of these DAOs currently in this space, and they have treasuries with massive capital in itself. But the thing is, like, when we look about the data, how much of this data is actually put to work for them, like in DeFi, it's a very small proportion, and we believe this is going to change in the future in itself. And for all of these three things, we believe, like, risk management is going to be a major driver of innovation for the next wave of DeFi space in itself. It is not only our opinion, like from Solity Networks, like also from relevant persons in the space, like, for example, from Dan from Pantera Capital, when we see how he defines basically the future of DeFi, it's based on risk in itself. So, are there any questions from your side? I'm open to answer. Alternatively, you can reach us at our Telegram group we set up, and we are more than happy to answer your questions. Looking forward.
Actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
Yes, so how this kind of real-time risk infrastructure gonna empower the maybe next generation DeFi projects? Like what, like new use cases or new scenario we can see?
Yeah, for example, we have now the yield aggregators as a simple case. They're basically looking at the space, looking where is the highest opportunity, and move the funds around that. The thing is, like, when we look around what is the decision making of these yield aggregators, it's basically just maximizing profit without looking at the risk in itself. That means if a yield aggregator has to decide between two opportunities, one delivers him 10%, the other one 9%, he will go for the highest one. Even the risk level are totally different in itself. And what will now happen, we will move from this maximizing profit idea to a risk-reward idea, and then when we take the risk in account, the yields in itself are going to be calculated differently, and with that, they are going to be, like, more efficient. This is like one simple case. And we can go down in direction of credit and so on. Like, if we want to build, like, uncollateralized solutions, we need the risk frameworks, and we see risk in itself more or less as a base layer for new products in itself.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm from Self Protocol. We're actually also invested by IOSG at a very early stage. So we have a new product, which is the first bound voucher. So we're issuing bound. And so far, we worked with a few projects, and we raised around 16 millions for them by issuing bonds. So it's very comparable to the bonds that works in Web 2. So we're actually looking for a solution to be a bit more clear to assess the risk of giving out those bonds. And there are some platforms you may have heard, such as TrueFi or Maple. They're doing non-collateralized lending and borrowing, and every platform has their own mechanism how to assess the risk. So I think this is also something that we can talk about it later to see what kind of solutions that you guys can offer.
Yeah, that sounds great. So basically, this is basically the customer groups we are looking for to empower. You have your solution, and we will just enhance your solution with our risk.
And what is your business model?
Our business model,
yeah.
So basically, like, there are two parts. The first one is like the centralized part. We don't need a centralization for the entities who are fine with what they have. It's more of a SaaS business model. And the second part is like when we have risk frameworks, we are basically charging by querying itself. Basically, to get the data on chain, you have some kind of costs, and then it depends basically how much decentralization do you want. And it starts also like not only from the storage in itself, but also from the computing level. If you want to have everything on chain, do you want some parts off chain, and so on. And according to that, charging model comes out.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Additional questions?
Okay. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you.
Thanks.